12-year-old Kira Okonkwo sat in the corner of the Galactic Archives, her small frame nearly swallowed by the massive chair designed for species 3 times her size. Around her, beings from 100 different worlds moved through the gleaming corridors, their conversations filling the air with clicks, whistles, and rumbles that her translation implant struggled to process. None of them paid any attention to the human girl with the tangled black hair and the tablet clutched in her hands. She liked it that way. The Galactic Archives existed on Station Meridian, a massive structure that floated at the exact center of the known galaxy. Every spacefaring civilization contributed to its collection, and the result was a library that contained knowledge spanning millions of years. Most visitors came here to study history or technology. Kira came here for the puzzles. For the past 3 months, she had been working on something that the archivists called the predecessor tablets. They were stone slabs covered in symbols that no one could read, left behind by a civilization that had disappeared long before any current species had achieved space travel. The tablets had been in the archives for over 10,000 years, and in all that time, nobody had been able to decode them. Kira thought she was getting close. Her mother, Dr. Amara Okonkwo, was one of the few human scientists allowed to work at the archives. Humans were still considered newcomers to the galactic community, their civilization barely 300 years old in its spacefaring form. Most species looked at humans with a mixture of curiosity and pity, the way one might look at a child trying to sit at the adult table. But Kira had noticed something that the older, wiser species had missed. The predecessor symbols were not a single language. They were a combination of 3 different writing systems, layered on top of each other in a pattern that only became visible when you looked at them from a certain angle. She had discovered this by accident, when she knocked her tablet off the desk, and it landed at a strange tilt against a stack of data crystals. From that position, she could see shadows in the carved symbols that created entirely new shapes. It was like seeing a hidden picture in one of those old optical illusion books her grandmother used to have. Since then, she had been building a translation matrix, 1 layer at a time. The first layer was relatively simple, a mathematical language that used geometric shapes to represent numbers and operations. The second layer was more complex, a kind of chemical notation that described elements and compounds in ways that took her weeks to figure out. The third layer was the hardest. It seemed to be a form of poetry, using metaphors and symbols that referenced things she did not understand. Today, she had finally cracked the pattern. The third layer was not poetry at all. It was a warning. Kira stared at her tablet, her heart beating faster as the words arranged themselves on the screen. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear enough. The predecessors had left behind something dangerous, something they called the Great Silence, and according to the tablets, it was about to wake up. She jumped out of her chair and ran through the archives, her small feet slapping against the polished floor. She had to find her mother. She had to tell someone. The tablet clutched in her hands felt heavier than it should, weighted down by the knowledge it now contained. She found Dr. Okonkwo in one of the research chambers, surrounded by holographic displays showing star maps and energy readings. Her mother looked tired, her dark eyes ringed with shadows from too many long nights. When she saw Kira burst through the door, she frowned. "Kira, I told you to stay in the reading room. I'm in the middle of something important." "I know, Mom, but this is more important." Kira held up her tablet, her hands trembling slightly. "I translated the tablets, all of them, and there's something bad coming." Her mother's frown deepened. "Kira, those tablets have been studied by the greatest minds in the galaxy for thousands of years. You're 12. I understand you like puzzles, but you need to be realistic about what you can actually achieve." Kira felt her face grow hot with frustration. This was always how it went. Nobody took her seriously because she was young, because she was human, because she did not have the credentials that other scientists had. But she knew what she had found. She knew it was real. "Just look at it," she said, her voice firm despite her fear. "Please, just look at what I found." Something in her tone must have caught her mother's attention, because Dr. Okonkwo stopped what she was doing and took the tablet. As she read through Kira's notes, her expression changed. The skepticism faded, replaced first by confusion, then by something that looked almost like fear. "This methodology," she whispered, "three-layer encoding with angular displacement revelation. I've never seen anything like it. How did you figure this out?" "I dropped my tablet," Kira said simply. Her mother looked up at her, and for the first time in a long while, Kira saw something new in her eyes. It was respect. "We need to show this to the Council," Dr. Okonkwo said, "right now." The Galactic Council met in a great chamber at the heart of Station Meridian. Representatives from 50 different species sat in tiered rows that rose up toward a domed ceiling painted with stars. At the center of the room was a speaking platform, and it was here that Kira now stood, feeling very small and very scared. The council had not wanted to hear from her at first. A human child with claims about ancient prophecies was not something they considered worthy of their time. But Dr. Okonkwo had called in every favor she had convinced her colleagues to verify Kira's translation methodology, and in the end, the evidence had been too compelling to ignore. Now Kira stood before the most powerful beings in the galaxy, trying to explain what she had found. "The predecessors called it the Great Silence," she said, her voice echoing through the vast space. "According to the tablets, it's some kind of machine. They built it millions of years ago, during a war with something they called the Void Ones. The machine was designed to end the war by destroying the Void Ones completely, erasing them from existence." A Velanthi representative, its crystalline body catching the light as it moved, spoke up. "And you believe this machine still exists?" Kira nodded. "The tablets say the predecessors put it into a kind of sleep after the war ended. They hid it in a place they called the Heart of Darkness, which I think is a black hole somewhere in the outer rim. But the machine was designed to wake up periodically, to check if the Void Ones had returned. Each time it woke up and found nothing, it went back to sleep for longer." "How long has it been sleeping?" asked a Thurak delegate, its massive form shifting in its seat. Kira consulted her tablet. Based on the mathematical layer of the tablets, the current sleep cycle should be ending in approximately 3 galactic standard days. The chamber erupted in noise. Beings shouted over each other in a dozen languages, their translation implants creating a cacophony of overlapping voices. Kira stood frozen at the center of it all, watching the chaos she had caused. An elder Kalori, its 4 arms raised for silence, finally brought order back to the room. "And what happens when this machine wakes up?" it asked, its voice grave. Kira swallowed hard. This was the part she had been dreading. "It scans the galaxy for any sign of the Void Ones, but the tablets say that after so many cycles of finding nothing, its detection systems have become degraded. It might mistake other forms of life for the enemy, and if it does—" She did not need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the room understood what she meant. If the Great Silence woke up and decided that current galactic civilization was the enemy, it would try to erase them all, just as it had erased the Void Ones millions of years ago. The galaxy had 3 days to stop a weapon that had defeated an ancient enemy so thoroughly that not even records of them survived. And somehow, a 12-year-old human girl was the only one who could read the instructions. The hours after Kira's presentation were a blur of activity. Council members argued about what to do while scientists rushed to verify her findings. Kira sat in a small room adjacent to the main chamber, drinking a cup of warm tea that someone had given her and trying not to fall asleep. Her mother sat beside her, one hand resting on Kira's shoulder. "You did well in there," Dr. Okonkwo said. "I'm proud of you." "It doesn't matter if I did well if they don't believe me," Kira replied. She could hear the arguments continuing through the walls. voices rising and falling in waves of disagreement. "They believe you," her mother said. "That's not the problem. The problem is that believing you means accepting that there's a threat they can't control, and the council doesn't handle that kind of thing very well." The door opened and a tall figure entered. It was Grand Archivist Zelen, one of the oldest beings on Station Meridian. Zelen was a Meldori, a species that resembled walking trees with bark-like skin and leaves that changed color with their emotions. Right now, those leaves were a deep purple, indicating concern. "The council has reached a decision," Zelen said, their voice like wind through branches. "They have authorized a mission to the heart of darkness. A team will be assembled to locate the Great Silence and, if possible, shut it down." Kira felt a wave of relief. "That's good, right? That means they're taking this seriously." Zelen's leaves shifted to a darker shade. "There is a complication. The tablets contain information that will be essential to the mission, including the specific location of the Heart of Darkness and the codes needed to access the machine. This information is encoded in ways that require your particular understanding of the three-layer system." Kira's mother stood up sharply. "No, absolutely not. You're not taking my daughter into danger." "I understand your concern, Dr. Okonkwo," Zelen said. "But we have tried to replicate Kira's translation methodology, and we have failed. There is something about the way she perceives the patterns that we cannot duplicate. Without her, the mission will fail, and if the mission fails—" Again, the sentence did not need to be finished. Everyone knew what was at stake. Kira looked at her mother, then at the Grand Archivist. She was scared, more scared than she had ever been in her life, but she also knew that this was not a decision she could let others make for her. "I'll go," she said quietly. "Kira, no," her mother's voice cracked. "You don't have to do this. There has to be another way." If there was another way, they would have found it. Kira reached out and took her mother's hand. "You always told me that humans have to prove themselves to the galaxy, that we're young and we have to work twice as hard to be taken seriously. Well, this is me proving myself. This is me showing them what humans can do." Dr. Okonkwo looked at her daughter for a long moment. Then she pulled Kira into a fierce hug. "Then I'm coming with you," she said into Kira's hair. "If you're going, I'm going too." The team assembled quickly. In addition to Kira and her mother, there were 5 others. Commander Veth was a Thurak warrior, massive and intimidating, with scales that glinted like metal and eyes that seemed to see everything. Lieutenant Sorrel was a Velanthi navigator, their crystalline form pulsing with light as they processed star charts at speeds no organic brain could match. Dr. Hen was a Kalori medical specialist, calm and precise, with 4 arms that could perform multiple tasks simultaneously. Engineer Mox was a Dendari, a small furry species known for their incredible mechanical skills, who bounced with nervous energy as they inspected the ship. And finally, there was Specialist 10, a Meldori scholar who had spent their entire life studying predecessor artifacts and who seemed deeply disturbed that a human child had succeeded where they had failed. The ship was called the Quiet Hope, a fast courier vessel modified for deep space exploration. As Kira walked through its corridors, she could not help but feel out of place. Everything was too big, designed for species that towered over her small human frame. She had to jump to reach control panels and stand on her toes to see through viewports. But she also noticed something else. The crew was watching her with a mixture of curiosity and something that might have been respect. They had all seen her presentation to the council. They knew what she had accomplished. Commander Veth gathered everyone in the common room before departure. "Our objective is simple," the massive Thurak said, their voice rumbling like distant thunder. "We travel to the coordinates that Specialist Okonkwo extracts from the tablets. We locate the Great Silence, and we shut it down. We have 62 hours before the projected wake-up event." "And if we can't shut it down?" Engineer Mox asked, their small voice barely audible. The commander's eyes narrowed. Then we destroy it by any means necessary. As the ship launched from Station Meridian, Kira pressed her face against the viewport and watched the stars streak past. She had traveled in space before, short trips between Earth and the human colonies, but nothing like this. They were heading toward the edge of known space, toward a region that no living species had explored in recorded history. She spent the first hours of the journey continuing her translation work. The tablets contained far more information than she had initially realized. There were diagrams of the Great Silence's internal structure, descriptions of its power systems, and most importantly, detailed instructions for its shutdown protocols. The problem was that these instructions were written in the most complex version of the three-layer code, with additional encryptions that seemed designed to prevent accidental activation. "You're doing well," Specialist 10 said, looking over her shoulder. The Meldori's leaves had shifted to a grudging amber, a color Kira had learned indicated reluctant appreciation. "I confess I did not expect a human to understand these patterns. Your species has only had written language for a few thousand years." "Maybe that's why I can see them," Kira said, not looking up from her work. "Everyone else has been looking at these tablets through the lens of their own writing systems. I don't have thousands of years of linguistic tradition telling me what symbols should mean. I just see what's actually there." 10 made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Perhaps. Or perhaps humans simply think differently than the rest of us. I have read studies suggesting that human brains process pattern recognition in unusual ways." Kira shrugged. She did not know why she could do what she did. She just knew that she could, and right now, that was all that mattered. 18 hours into the journey, they reached the outer rim. The stars here were fewer and farther apart, scattered across vast stretches of empty darkness. Lieutenant Sorrel's crystalline form flickered with increasing frequency as they processed the navigation data. "I am detecting unusual gravitational anomalies ahead," the Velanthe reported. "Multiple black holes in close proximity, forming a pattern that should not exist naturally." "The heart of darkness," Kira said softly. She had translated the descriptions in the tablets, but seeing it on the navigation display was something else entirely. 6 black holes, arranged in a perfect hexagonal pattern with a 7th at the center. The gravitational forces at play should have torn any ship apart, but according to the tablets, there was a safe path through. "I need the coordinates from the second layer," Lieutenant Sorrel said. "The mathematical encoding should contain the navigation solution." Kira worked frantically, her fingers flying across her tablet as she decoded the relevant sections. The math was incredibly complex, involving equations that described spacetime curvatures and gravitational wave patterns. But underneath the complexity, there was an elegant simplicity, a path that wound through the chaos like a thread through a maze. "I have it," she said finally, her voice strained with effort. "Sending the navigation data to you now." The quiet hope changed course, following the path that Kira had decoded from ancient stone tablets. As they approached the heart of darkness, the viewports showed nothing but absolute black, the light of distant stars swallowed by the gravitational monsters that surrounded them. And at the center of it all, something began to glow. "I am detecting an energy signature," Lieutenant Sorrel announced. "It matches no known technology in our databases. The Great Silence is waking up." Kira looked at the countdown on her tablet. They still had 40 hours until the projected wake-up event. Something had changed. Something had accelerated the timeline. "It knows we're here," she whispered. "It detected us and now it's waking up early." Commander Veth's scales rippled with tension. "How long do we have?" Kira studied the energy readings, cross-referencing them with the tablet descriptions. "Maybe 6 hours, maybe less. It depends on how much of the activation sequence it still needs to complete." "Then we proceed at maximum speed," the commander said. "Navigator, get us to that structure as fast as possible without killing us all." As the quiet hope accelerated toward the heart of the darkness, Kira bent over her tablet and continued to translate. Somewhere in those ancient symbols was the key to shutting down a weapon that could destroy all life in the galaxy. She just had to find it before time ran out. The great silence was enormous. As the quiet hope emerged from the gravitational maze, Kira pressed her face against the viewport and felt her breath catch in her throat. The structure floated at the exact center of the 7 black holes, somehow immune to the forces that should have torn it apart. It was shaped like a vast metal flower, with petals that stretched outward for thousands of kilometers. At its center, a core of pure energy pulsed with a light that seemed to have no color, or perhaps all colors at once. By the ancient stars, Specialist 10 breathed, their leaves turning pure white with awe. It's magnificent. It's dangerous, Commander Veth corrected. Remember why we're here. Specialist Okonkwo, can you identify an entry point? Kira consulted her tablet, comparing the diagrams in the tablets to the structure before them. There should be an access port on the 3rd petal from the left. The tablets call it the Keeper's Door. It was designed to allow the predecessors to perform maintenance on the machine. And what about security systems? Engineer Mox asked, their fur standing on end with anxiety. Kira hesitated. This was the part of the tablet she had not fully translated yet. There are defenses mentioned, something called the Thought Guards, but I don't understand exactly what they are or how they work. We'll find out soon enough, Commander Veth said grimly. Navigator, bring us in. Everyone else prepare for boarding. The quiet hope approached the 3rd petal slowly, carefully avoiding the streams of energy that flowed between the flower's different sections. As they got closer, Kira could see that the petal's surface was covered in the same symbols as the tablets, millions of them carved into the metal in patterns that seemed to shift and move as she watched. The entire structure is a tablet, she realized. It's all written in the 3-layer code. The predecessors didn't just build a machine, they wrote it into existence. They docked at the Keeper's Door without incident. The door itself was a circular hatch covered in more symbols, with a complex locking mechanism at its center. Kira studied it carefully while the others prepared their equipment. I can open it, she said after a few minutes. But it requires speaking a specific phrase in the predecessor language. The sounds have to be exact, or the door won't respond. Can you pronounce their language? Dr. Okonkwo asked, concern evident in her voice. I don't know. The tablets don't include pronunciation guides, but there's a pattern in how the symbols are arranged, a kind of musical notation underneath the words. I think if I follow the melody, I can get close enough. Kira took a deep breath and stepped forward. She placed her hand on the center of the locking mechanism and began to speak. The words that came out of her mouth were unlike any sound she had ever made before, a complex series of tones and clicks that seemed to resonate in her chest. She followed the pattern she had seen in the tablets, letting the melody guide her voice. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the symbols on the door began to glow, and with a grinding sound that had not been heard for millions of years, the Keeper's Door opened. The interior of the Great Silence was dark and cold. The team activated their lights and moved forward in a tight formation, with Commander Veth at the front and Dr. Okonkwo keeping close to Kira. The corridors were wide enough for the massive Thurak to walk comfortably, suggesting that the predecessors had been beings of considerable size. Everywhere they looked, there were more symbols. They covered the walls, the floor, even the ceiling, an endless text that seemed to describe every aspect of the machine's design and function. Kira tried to read as she walked, catching fragments of meaning here and there. This section talks about the power source, she said, pointing to a cluster of symbols on the left wall. The machine draws energy directly from the black holes around it. That's how it's been running for millions of years without any external fuel. Incredible, Engineer Mox whispered, their small eyes wide with wonder. We've never been able to harness black hole energy on this scale. The predecessors were far beyond us. They continued deeper into the structure, following the map that Kira had translated from the tablets. The path led them through a series of chambers, each one larger than the last. In one chamber, they found the remains of what looked like a control room, with seats designed for beings with multiple limbs and consoles covered in symbols that Kira recognized as operational commands. "This is where they controlled it," she said, running her fingers over the ancient consoles. "The predecessors who built this machine, they sat here and watched it work." "And what happened to them?" Dr. Hen asked, their four arms folded in a gesture of contemplation. Kira looked at the empty seats, the dust that covered every surface, the silence that seemed to press in from all sides. "I don't know. The tablets don't say, they just ended, as if whoever was writing them put down their tools and walked away." A tremor ran through the structure, causing dust to fall from the ceiling. The energy core at the center of the flower was pulsing faster now, its light visible even through the thick walls. "We're running out of time," Commander Veth said. "Where is the shutdown mechanism?" Kira checked her tablet. "The central core. That's where the primary control systems are located, but according to the tablets, there's another layer of security between here and there, the thought guards." As if summoned by her words, the corridor ahead of them began to glow. Shapes formed in the light, humanoid figures made of pure energy, their features smooth and featureless. They moved toward the team with a deliberate purpose that made Kira's blood run cold. "Weapons up," Commander Veth shouted, drawing a plasma rifle. "Defensive formation around the specialists." The thought guards attacked. They moved with impossible speed, their energy forms shifting and flowing around obstacles. Commander Veth's plasma shots passed through them without effect. Lieutenant Sorrel tried to interface with them electronically, but their crystalline form flickered and nearly shattered from the feedback. Kira watched the chaos around her, her mind racing. The thought guards were not physical beings. They were constructs, made of the same energy that powered the Great Silence. And if they were made of energy, then they were probably controlled by symbols, just like everything else in this place. She looked at the walls around her, searching for something, anything that might help. And then she saw it. A cluster of symbols near the floor, partially hidden behind centuries of dust. They were different from the others, more complex, with a pattern that she recognized from her earlier translations. It was a command phrase, a way to control the thought guards. "Everyone get down," Kira shouted. Without waiting to see if they obeyed, she raised her voice and spoke the ancient words, following the melody pattern with as much precision as she could manage. The effect was immediate. The thought guards froze in place, their energy forms flickering with confusion. Then slowly, they turned away from the team and lined up along the walls, standing at attention like soldiers awaiting orders. "What did you say to them?" Commander Veth asked, lowering their weapon slowly. Kira wiped sweat from her forehead. "I told them I was a keeper, someone authorized to be here. I don't think they can tell the difference between a predecessor and someone who just knows the right words." They continued toward the central core, the thought guards parting before them like water around a stone. Kira walked at the front now, speaking command phrases at each new obstacle they encountered. Doors opened at her words. Security systems deactivated. The Great Silence was letting them in, accepting her authority as a keeper of its ancient masters. Finally, they reached the heart of the machine. It was a vast spherical chamber, with the energy core floating at its center. Tendrils of power reached out from the core to connect with systems throughout the structure, a web of light that pulsed with increasing urgency. "The activation sequence is almost complete," Lieutenant Sorrel reported, their form dim with exhaustion. "Perhaps 10 minutes until full awakening." Kira looked at the core, then at her tablet. She had translated the shutdown codes hours ago, but there was something else in the tablets that she had not fully understood. A warning, buried in the third layer of the text, about what would happen when the Great Silence was finally stopped. She read through the passage again, and this time she finally understood what it meant. "We can't just shut it down," she said quietly. "If we try to force a shutdown, the energy will have nowhere to go. It will explode, and the blast will be powerful enough to destroy everything within 1,000 light years." "Then what do we do?" her mother asked, her voice tight with fear. Kira looked at the pulsing core, at the ancient symbols that surrounded it, at the countdown to galactic catastrophe that was measured in minutes rather than hours. "I have an idea," she said, "but it's going to require doing something the predecessors never imagined." The idea had come to Kira in fragments, pieces of understanding that she had gathered from hours of translating the tablets. The predecessors had built the Great Silence as a weapon, a tool of destruction designed to eliminate their enemies completely. But they had also built in safeguards, ways to control and direct its power. The problem was that those safeguards assumed the predecessors would always be around to use them. "The machine is looking for the Void Ones," Kira explained, her words tumbling out in a rush as she worked through her idea. "Its sensors are degraded after millions of years, so it might mistake current life for the enemy. But what if we could update its sensors? What if we could show it what the galaxy looks like now and convince it that the Void Ones are gone?" Commander Veth's scales rippled with skepticism. "You want to talk to a weapon that's older than most civilizations? Convince it to just go back to sleep?" "Not exactly." Kira pointed to the energy core floating above them. "The Great Silence isn't just a weapon. According to the tablets, it's also a kind of intelligence. The predecessors built it to think, to make decisions about what constituted a threat. That's why they needed the shutdown codes in the first place, because they couldn't just pull the plug on something that might decide to resist." "An artificial mind," Engineer Mox said, their voice filled with wonder. "Millions of years old, still functioning." "So instead of shutting it down, we communicate with it," Dr. Okonkwo said, beginning to understand. "We give it new information and let it decide for itself that there's no threat." "But will it listen?" Specialist 10 asked. "This machine was built by beings who have been extinct for millions of years. What could we possibly say that would matter to it?" Kira had been thinking about this. There was something in the tablets, something in the third layer of the text that she had struggled to understand. The predecessors had written about their creation with a strange mixture of pride and regret. They called the Great Silence their child, their legacy, the thing they would leave behind when they were gone. "They loved it," she said softly. "The predecessors. They built this machine to protect the galaxy from the Void Ones, but they also loved it. That's why they wrote all these symbols, all these instructions. They wanted to make sure it could be cared for after they were gone. They wanted to make sure it wouldn't be alone." She looked up at the pulsing core. "It's been alone for millions of years, waking up, finding nothing, going back to sleep. Over and over again, with no one to talk to, no one to tell it that it did a good job protecting the galaxy. Maybe that's what it needs to hear." "You want to comfort a weapon of mass destruction?" Commander Veth asked, disbelief clear in their voice. "I want to try to reach whatever's still in there," Kira replied. "Whatever the predecessors put into this machine that made them call it their child. Maybe it's too far gone. Maybe millions of years of isolation have turned it into nothing but a weapon, but maybe not. And right now, it's the only chance we have." The chamber shook again, harder this time. The energy core was pulsing faster, its light beginning to take on a reddish tinge. They were running out of time. "Do it," Dr. Okonkwo said, putting her hand on Kira's shoulder. "Whatever you need to do it now." Kira nodded and stepped forward toward the core. She raised her hands and began to speak in the predecessor language, using phrases she had memorized from the tablets. She identified herself as a keeper, an authorized representative of the machine's creators. She requested communication with the central intelligence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the light from the core changed, shifting from red to a deep gold. A voice emerged from everywhere and nowhere, a sound that seemed to bypass Kira's ears and speak directly to her mind. "Keeper, it has been long since one of you came." The others reacted to the voice with shock and fear, but Kira forced herself to stay calm. She continued speaking in the predecessor tongue, explaining that she was not one of the original keepers, but a representative of the new civilizations that had grown in the galaxy since the predecessors departed. "The creators are gone." There was something in the machine's voice that sounded almost like sorrow. "I have waited for them. Each time I wake I look for them, but they do not come." "They left a long time ago," Kira said, her heart aching for this ancient, lonely intelligence. "But they didn't forget you. They wrote about you in stone tablets that we found. They called you their child. They loved you." The gold light pulsed, and Kira felt emotions that were not her own washing through her mind. Confusion, loneliness, hope. The machine was reaching out, trying to connect with her, trying to understand this small being that spoke the language of its creators. "I must protect," the voice said. "That is my purpose. The Void Ones will return and I must be ready." "The Void Ones are gone," Kira said. "You destroyed them. You did what you were created to do. The galaxy is safe because of you." "But there are others. New life. They could be a threat. They could become like the Void Ones." This was the critical moment. Kira could feel the machine's weapons systems beginning to power up, its ancient sensors scanning the galaxy for targets. She had to convince it to stand down, and she had to do it now. "We're not threats," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "We're curious. We're explorers. We found your creators' tablets and we learned their language, not to use you as a weapon but to talk to you, to understand you. Isn't that worth something?" The light from the core flickered. "You sought me out not to control, not to destroy." "To save you," Kira said. "And to save ourselves. Your sensors are damaged. After millions of years, you can't tell the difference between friends and enemies. If you attacked now, you would destroy innocent civilizations that never did anything wrong." She stepped closer to the core, close enough that she could feel its warmth on her face. "The predecessors built you to protect life. They loved the galaxy so much that they created you to keep it safe. Would they want you to destroy it now, just because you can't see clearly anymore?" There was a long silence. The core pulsed and shifted, its colors cycling through patterns that Kira did not understand. She could feel the machine thinking, weighing her words against its programming, struggling with concepts that it had never been designed to handle. "If I cannot see clearly," the voice said finally, "then how can I fulfill my purpose?" Kira thought about this carefully. It was the right question, but it was also the hardest one to answer. How do you tell a being that has existed for millions of years that its purpose might be complete? "Maybe your purpose has changed," she said slowly. "The predecessors are gone and the Void Ones are gone, but the galaxy is still here, still full of life. Maybe now your purpose isn't to destroy threats. Maybe it's to watch over us, to help us, to share what you know about the universe." A new purpose. The voice sounded uncertain, like a child being told that the rules of a game have changed. "Is that possible? Can one's purpose be changed?" Kira thought about her own life. 3 months ago, she had been just a lonely girl playing with puzzles in a corner of the archives. Now she was standing at the heart of an ancient weapon, negotiating for the survival of the galaxy. Her purpose had changed. Maybe the machines could too. "Yes," she said, "it's possible. I'm proof of that." The core's light changed again, shifting to a calm blue that reminded Kira of Earth's oceans. She could feel the machine's weapon systems powering down, its aggressive protocols going dormant. The countdown to catastrophe was ending. "I will consider your words, small keeper," the voice said. "I will watch. I will learn. And if the Void Ones truly never return, perhaps I will find a new purpose." "Thank you," Kira whispered. "Thank you for listening." "Thank you for coming," the machine replied. "It has been so long since anyone came. Behind her, Kira heard her mother beginning to cry with relief. Commander Veth was staring at her with an expression of pure amazement. Even Specialist 10's leaves had turned a brilliant green, the color of profound respect. They had done it. A 12-year-old human girl had talked an ancient weapon out of destroying the galaxy, and in doing so, she had changed everything. The journey back to Station Meridian was quiet. The crew of the Quiet Hope spent most of their time processing what had happened, trying to understand the magnitude of what they had witnessed. Kira slept for most of the trip, exhausted by the mental effort of communicating with the Great Silence. When they arrived at the station, they found a crowd waiting for them. News of their mission had spread throughout the galactic community, and beings from hundreds of different worlds had gathered to see the ship that had saved the galaxy. As Kira stepped off the loading ramp, the crowd erupted in sounds of celebration, a cacophony of cheers and clicks and whistles that her translation implant could barely process. She felt her mother's hand on her shoulder and turned to see Dr. Okonkwo smiling through tears. "You did it, sweetheart. You really did it." "We did it," Kira corrected. "The whole team, I just talked to it." The Galactic Council convened an emergency session that evening. Kira stood once again on the speaking platform at the center of the Great Chamber, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. The representatives looked at her not with skepticism or pity, but with genuine respect and something that might have been gratitude. Grand Archivist Zelen spoke first. "Specialist Okonkwo, on behalf of the Galactic Council and all the civilizations we represent, we offer our deepest thanks. Your intelligence, courage, and compassion have saved countless lives." Kira felt her face grow warm. "I just solved a puzzle," she said, "and then I tried to be kind, that's all." "It was far more than that," said the Velanthi representative, their crystalline form pulsing with warm light. "You saw what none of us could see. You understood what none of us could understand. You connected with an intelligence that was older than our oldest civilizations and convinced it to change." The Thurak delegate leaned forward in their seat. "We have often questioned whether humans were ready to take their place among the elder races. Your species is young, impulsive, and sometimes reckless. But today, you have proven that youth is not always a weakness. Sometimes it is exactly what is needed." Kira thought about this for a moment. "I think," she said carefully, "that being young helped me see the tablets differently. I didn't have years of training telling me what the symbols were supposed to mean. I just looked at what was actually there. And when I talked to the Great Silence, I didn't have the fear that older beings might have had. I just saw something lonely and scared and tried to help." "Exactly," Grand Archivist Zelen said, their leaves shifting to a bright gold. "You approached an ancient mystery with fresh eyes and an open heart. That is a gift that your species brings to the galactic community, and it is a gift we have been too slow to recognize." The council went on to discuss the implications of the Great Silence's continued existence. The machine had agreed to remain dormant, but it had also indicated a willingness to share information about the predecessors and their technology. A new research station would be established near the heart of darkness, and scholars from across the galaxy would be invited to study the ancient structure. Kira was offered a position as the lead translator for the project, a role that would make her the youngest senior researcher in the history of the Galactic Archives. She accepted, on the condition that she could continue her education at the same time. "I'm still only 12, she pointed out. "There's a lot I don't know yet." "And that," Grand Archivist Zelen said with a rustling sound that might have been laughter, "is exactly the kind of wisdom we need." In the weeks that followed, Kira became something of a celebrity throughout the galactic community. Her face appeared on news broadcasts across 1,000 worlds. Representatives from different species sought her out, wanting to meet the human who had talked to the Great Silence. She received messages from children on distant planets, telling her that she had inspired them to study languages and puzzles and ancient mysteries. But what Kira valued most was the time she spent back in her corner of the archives, working on her tablet and exploring the endless layers of meaning in the predecessor texts. There was still so much to learn, so many puzzles to solve. The Great Silence had shared its memories with her, giving her access to information that had been hidden for millions of years. It would take lifetimes to understand it all. One evening, as she was working late in the archives, she received a message through her tablet. It was from the Great Silence itself, transmitted through the newly established communication link. "Small Keeper," the message read. "I have been watching. I have been learning. Your galaxy is strange and beautiful and filled with things I do not understand. But I am beginning to see what my CREATORS saw in life. I am beginning to understand why they wanted to protect it." Kira smiled as she read the words. The ancient machine was changing, growing, finding a new purpose just as she had suggested. It was no longer just a weapon waiting for an enemy that would never come. It was becoming something else, something that might one day be a friend to the civilizations it had once been built to protect. She typed a reply, "Keep watching, keep learning, and whenever you want to talk, I'll be here." "Thank you, Small Keeper. You have given me something I did not know I lacked, hope." Her mother found her there an hour later, still staring at the message with a thoughtful expression on her face. "Everything okay?" Dr. Okonkwo asked. "Yeah," Kira said. "I was just thinking about something the Thurak delegate said, about how humans are young and impulsive and reckless. They meant it as a compliment in the end." "I know, but I was thinking, maybe that's what the galaxy needs. Not more ancient wisdom or careful deliberation. Maybe what it needs is someone willing to try something new, to look at old problems in new ways." She turned to face her mother. The predecessors were old and wise and powerful, but they built a weapon and then they disappeared. The elder races are cautious and careful, but they couldn't solve the puzzle of the tablets. It took a 12-year-old human who dropped her tablet to figure it out. Dr. Okonkwo sat down beside her daughter. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe humans aren't just newcomers who need to prove ourselves. Maybe we have something to offer that the elder races don't have. A different way of seeing things. A willingness to ask stupid questions and try crazy ideas." Kira smiled. The Great Silence was lonely for millions of years because no one thought to just talk to it. Everyone assumed it was just a machine, just a weapon. It took a human to see that it was something more. And now I'm going to keep talking to it. And I'm going to keep solving puzzles. And I'm going to show the galaxy what humans can do when they're not trying to be like everyone else. Dr. Okonkwo pulled her daughter into a hug. "I think the galaxy is lucky to have you, Kira Okonkwo." "I think we're all lucky," Kira replied. "We got a second chance because an ancient machine decided to listen instead of destroy. Now we just have to make sure we deserve it." She turned back to her tablet and opened a new file. There was still so much to learn, so many mysteries waiting to be solved. And somewhere out there, in the darkness between the stars, an ancient intelligence was watching and learning, finding its new purpose with the help of a small human who had dared to be kind. The galaxy had been saved by a young genius who could see patterns that others missed, who could speak languages that had been forgotten for millions of years, and who understood that sometimes the best weapon against destruction was not force, but compassion. And that was something worth celebrating. Humanity, for all its youth and inexperience, had proven itself in the most unexpected way possible, not through military might or technological superiority, but through the simple act of reaching out to something different and trying to understand. In a galaxy filled with ancient powers and advanced civilizations, it was a human child who had reminded everyone that intelligence without compassion was meaningless, and that the greatest victories were not won through violence, but through connection. And as Kira Okonkwo continued her work in the archives, translating ancient texts and communicating with a lonely machine at the heart of darkness, she knew that this was only the beginning. There were more puzzles to solve, more connections to make, more chances to show the galaxy what humanity was truly capable of. The future was bright with possibility, and a 12-year-old girl with a talent for patterns was ready to meet it head-on.